She had arranged over 50,000 bouquets in 12 years, for weddings that brought tears of joy, for funerals that honored lives well lived, for forgiveness flowers that mended broken hearts. Elena Reyes knew that flowers carried messages words couldn't express, and her small shop on Main Street had become the heart of emotional moments for an entire community. At 48, she was exactly what customers hoped for in their neighborhood florist. Warm, intuitive, and somehow always able to create arrangements that said exactly what people needed them to say. But when a sophisticated trafficking operation approached her about using Sunshine Flowers delivery vans for special transport services, they awakened someone who'd spent 14 years infiltrating the darkest criminal organizations as a DEA undercover operative, and who would sacrifice everything she'd built to protect the community that had become her chosen family. Welcome to Human Stories. Before we begin this incredible tale of hidden courage and community protection, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. If you believe everyday heroes bloom in the most unexpected places, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who fight darkness while spreading beauty. Sunshine Flowers sat on the corner of Main Street and Elm Avenue, like a burst of color in downtown Millbrook's business district. The converted Victorian house with its wraparound porch, hanging baskets overflowing with seasonal blooms, and hand-painted sign had been Elena Reyes's sanctuary for 12 years. A place where beauty could flourish and people could find exactly the flowers their hearts needed. Elena had opened the shop with her late husband Miguel, transforming what had been a tired insurance office into the kind of community gathering place that small towns cherished. The couple had invested their life savings, countless hours of renovation work, and a shared vision of creating space where flowers could tell stories that words couldn't capture. Now, 4 years after Miguel's death from cancer, Elena ran Sunshine Flowers alone, but not lonely. Her daily rhythm included the elderly Mrs. Patterson, who bought a single rose every Tuesday to place on her husband's grave. Young couples planning weddings who trusted Elena to understand their vision for the most important day of their lives. Busy professionals who needed "I'm sorry" arrangements that could repair relationships damaged by work stress and poor communication. Elena's greatest gift wasn't just arranging flowers, it was reading people. She understood which customers needed cheerful sunflowers to lift depression, which required elegant lilies for formal apologies, and which wanted simple daisies that said, "thinking of you," without overwhelming grief. Her arrangements carried emotional intelligence that made them more than decorative. They became healing tools for a community that had learned to trust her judgment about matters of the heart. But Elena's intuitive understanding of human nature was rooted in training that her customers would never have suspected. Before she became the beloved florist who somehow always knew exactly what people needed, Elena had been Agent Elena Martinez, Drug Enforcement Administration. For 14 years, she had worked undercover in criminal organizations that trafficked narcotics across international borders, developing the ability to read people, recognize deception, and survive in environments where one mistake meant death. Her specialty had been infiltrating family-based trafficking networks that used legitimate businesses as cover for moving drugs and money between countries. Elena's background as a Mexican-American woman with native-level Spanish fluency had made her invaluable for operations targeting cartels that exploited cultural connections and family loyalty to build criminal empires. The work had been successful, but psychologically devastating. Elena had saved lives by providing intelligence that dismantled trafficking operations, but the constant deception required to maintain her cover had left her questioning whether she could ever have authentic relationships with people who didn't know the truth about her identity and capabilities. When Miguel was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, Elena had made the decision to leave undercover work and focus on building a life that was genuine rather than performed. The flower shop had been Miguel's idea. a way to use Elena's ability to understand people for healing rather than law enforcement, creating beauty rather than gathering evidence. Elena had discovered that running Sunshine Flowers required many of the same skills she'd developed during DEA operations, reading customers' emotions and needs, recognizing when people weren't telling the complete truth about their situations, understanding the difference between legitimate requests and attempts to exploit her services for purposes she couldn't support. For 12 years, Elena had successfully buried her law enforcement background beneath layers of genuine community service and artistic expression. She had become exactly what she appeared to be, a dedicated florist whose greatest qualification was caring about people's emotional needs and understanding that flowers could provide comfort during life's most difficult moments. But some instincts never disappear completely. They just wait quietly until circumstances require their activation. Tuesday morning in early March brought the usual collection of customers who needed flowers for the week's celebrations, apologies, and remembrances. Elena was arranging a sympathy bouquet for the Wilson family when 3 men entered Sunshine Flowers with the kind of coordinated awareness that immediately activated her threat assessment instincts. They weren't regular customers, and they weren't browsing for personal purchases. They moved like people conducting business rather than shopping for flowers, positioning themselves throughout the store in a way that suggested coordination rather than coincidence. The leader approached Elena's counter with professional confidence. "Ms. Reyes, we understand you provide delivery services for special occasions." Elena looked up from the lilies she was arranging, noting details that would have been invisible to civilian business owners, but were routine observations for someone with her background. The men wore expensive clothing but moved like people accustomed to violence. Their positioning blocked exit routes while appearing casual. Most importantly, they referred to her by name despite never having visited her shop before. "Yes, I deliver flowers throughout the county," Elena replied with her normal customer service warmth. "What kind of arrangement were you looking for?" "Actually, we're more interested in your delivery capabilities than your flowers," the leader said. "We represent a business network that needs reliable transportation services for sensitive materials." Elena's DEA training provided immediate recognition of criminal recruitment methodology. Legitimate businesses didn't approach florists about transportation services for sensitive materials. These men were either testing her for criminal collaboration or attempting to recruit her delivery operation as cover for illegal activities. "I only deliver flowers and arrangements," Elena said politely. "If you need other transportation services, I can recommend some local courier companies." The leader's expression shifted slightly, suggesting her response wasn't what they'd hoped to hear. "Perhaps we weren't clear about the compensation involved. We're talking about very generous payment for very simple services." Elena set down her pruning shears and gave the men her complete attention. 14 years of undercover work had taught her to recognize when situations were escalating from recruitment to coercion, and these men had just crossed that line. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your interest in my business, but Sunshine Flowers provides floral services exclusively. I'm not interested in expanding into other areas." The second man stepped closer to the counter. "Ms. Reyes, we've done our research. You run a small business with modest profit margins. Your delivery van is perfect for our needs, and we're prepared to pay enough to solve all your financial concerns permanently." Elena realized they had investigated her business finances, which meant this wasn't a random approach. It was a targeted recruitment of her specific operation. The question was whether they knew about her law enforcement background or simply viewed her as a vulnerable small business owner who could be intimidated into cooperation. "What exactly would you need transported?" Elena asked, maintaining her professional tone while gathering intelligence about their operation. "Medical supplies," the third man said quickly. "Nothing illegal. Just items that require discretion and reliable delivery." Elena's experience with drug trafficking operations provided immediate translation of this euphemism. Medical supplies requiring discretion usually meant either stolen pharmaceuticals or people being moved against their will for purposes that legitimate medical facilities couldn't support. "I see," Elena said calmly. "And what kind of schedule would this transportation require?" The leader smiled, apparently interpreting her question as interest rather than intelligence gathering. "Primarily evening and weekend deliveries, routes between here and several other cities, very straightforward logistics." Elena understood that evening and weekend schedules were designed to avoid law enforcement attention while moving contraband or victims between facilities. The multiple cities suggested a network operation rather than isolated criminal activity. "How did you learn about my delivery services?" Elena asked. "Word gets around when someone runs a reliable business," the leader replied evasively. "We prefer working with established operators who understand the value of discretion." Elena realized that these men had identified Sunshine Flowers as a potential asset for criminal operations, probably because small businesses with delivery capabilities were attractive covers for transportation that wouldn't attract law enforcement attention. They assumed that financial pressure would make her willing to participate in activities she didn't fully understand. They had made a critical miscalculation about who they were attempting to recruit. Elena's investigation of the medical supply transportation request began with methods that appeared to be routine business consideration, but actually drew on intelligence-gathering techniques she'd perfected during 14 years of undercover operations. "Let me think about your proposal," she told the man. "Can you provide references from other business owners you've worked with? I like to verify partnerships before committing to new services." The leader exchanged glances with his associates, a reaction that confirmed Elena's assessment that they weren't accustomed to potential recruits conducting due diligence on criminal operations. "We prefer to keep our business relationships confidential," he said. "But we can assure you that our previous partners have been very satisfied with the arrangements." Elena nodded understandingly while noting the language patterns that belonged to organized crime rather than legitimate business development. "Of course. Can you give me a day or two to consider the logistics? I'd need to evaluate whether my current delivery schedule could accommodate additional services." After the men left, Elena immediately began research that would have impressed her former DEA supervisors. She used the license plate numbers she'd memorized to track the vehicles through law enforcement databases she still had access to as a retired federal agent. She analyzed the business cards they'd provided using techniques that revealed they were printed recently and contained contact information that led to burner phones and mail drops. Most importantly, Elena activated surveillance protocols that allowed her to monitor criminal activities in her community without alerting the perpetrators to official interest in their operations. What she discovered over the following week confirmed her worst suspicions about human trafficking operations that were using legitimate businesses as transportation covers. The men who had approached her were part of a network that moved trafficking victims between safe houses, processing facilities, and buyers throughout a 3-state region. They used flower delivery vans, catering trucks, and other service vehicles that could travel between cities without attracting law enforcement attention. Elena's flower shop had been targeted because Sunshine Flower's excellent reputation and regular delivery routes would provide perfect cover for transporting people who had been kidnapped for forced labor, sexual exploitation, or organ harvesting. The trafficking network's victims included immigrants who had been promised legitimate employment, runaway teenagers who had been lured with offers of housing and support, and adults who had been kidnapped from other cities and were being moved to locations where they would disappear permanently. Elena realized that her refusal to participate in the transportation scheme had probably saved lives, but it had also identified her as a potential threat to operations that generated millions of dollars in profits for criminal organizations that eliminated obstacles through violence. She faced a tactical decision that would determine not only her own safety, but the survival of victims who were currently being held in facilities throughout the region. She could report her intelligence to federal agencies and hope that law enforcement could respond before the trafficking network relocated or eliminated evidence. Or she could implement direct intervention using capabilities that would expose her carefully hidden identity, but might be the only chance to save people who were running out of time. The choice became clear when Elena intercepted communications, indicating that the traffickers planned to eliminate her and take over Sunshine Flowers' delivery operation, using her established routes and customer relationships as permanent cover for moving victims throughout the region. Some missions required immediate action regardless of personal consequences or the peaceful life she'd spent 12 years building. Elena's transformation from florist to federal operative began with planning that drew on 14 years of experience infiltrating criminal organizations that viewed violence as routine business practice and civilian casualties as acceptable operational costs. Her first priority was protecting her customers and community from becoming collateral damage in an operation that would turn Sunshine Flowers into a battleground between law enforcement and traffickers who possessed military-grade weapons and international resources. Elena activated communication protocols that connected her with federal agencies specializing in trafficking interdiction, providing detailed intelligence about the network's operations while coordinating tactical support that would allow comprehensive arrests without alerting other criminal organizations to law enforcement methods. This is retired Agent Elena Martinez requesting immediate federal assistance for human trafficking interdiction, Elena transmitted using encrypted equipment that appeared to be standard business communication systems. Multiple victims in custody, network planning hostile takeover of civilian business for transportation cover. The response was immediate and coordinated by agencies that had been tracking similar operations in other regions. Copy, Agent Martinez. Tactical assets moving to your location. What is your assessment of victim count and operational timeline? Minimum 20 victims confirmed in custody, network planning elimination of civilian business owner within 48 hours, Elena replied. Request coordinated response for victim recovery and evidence preservation. Elena's second priority was gathering additional intelligence about the trafficking network's operational structure, victim locations, and transportation methods that would ensure maximum rescue operations while preventing the criminals from relocating or eliminating evidence. Using surveillance techniques that appeared to be routine business activities, Elena documented vehicle movements, personnel schedules, and communication patterns that revealed the network was larger and more sophisticated than her initial assessment had suggested. The traffickers operated processing facilities in 3 counties, maintained safe houses in 6 cities, and had established buyer networks that extended throughout the eastern United States. Their victims were being prepared for sale to buyers who specialized in forced labor, sexual exploitation, and medical procedures that required healthy organs from unwilling donors. Elena's third priority was ensuring that her intervention would protect rather than endanger the victims who were currently being held in facilities designed to break their will and prepare them for lives of exploitation or death. The plan that emerged from Elena's analysis required precise coordination between federal agencies, local law enforcement, and community organizations that could provide immediate support for trafficking survivors who would need medical care, trauma counseling, and long-term assistance rebuilding their lives. On Thursday evening, as Elena closed Sunshine Flowers and prepared for what appeared to be a normal night at home, but was actually the beginning of the largest trafficking bust in the region's history, she realized that 12 years of peaceful civilian life were about to be permanently sacrificed in service of protecting people she'd never met, but whose lives depended entirely on her willingness to risk everything she'd built. Some people opened flower shops because they loved creating beauty and bringing joy to others' special moments. Others opened them because they understood that small businesses were perfect covers for continuing to fight evil using different methods and better community positioning. Thursday night at 11:47 p.m., Elena received the call she'd been expecting. The trafficking network leader's voice was calm, but carried unmistakable threat. "Ms. Reyes, we need to finalize our transportation arrangement. My associates will be at your shop in 1 hour to discuss the new terms." Elena understood that new terms meant elimination rather than negotiation. The traffickers had decided that her refusal to cooperate made her a liability that required permanent solution. "Of course," Elena replied in the compliant tone that suggested successful intimidation. "I'll be here waiting." But Elena's preparation for the traffickers' arrival drew on capabilities that extended far beyond floral arrangement and customer service. Her flower shop had been equipped with modifications that weren't visible to customers, but provided tactical advantages to someone with her background: communication systems that connected to federal agencies, security measures that could contain multiple armed subjects, and resources that appeared to be normal business supplies but served additional purposes for someone trained in special operations. At 12:52 a.m., 4 men arrived at Sunshine Flowers expecting to find a frightened small business owner who could be easily eliminated and replaced with personnel who would use her delivery operation for transporting trafficking victims. What they found instead was retired agent Elena Martinez, who had spent 14 years learning to neutralize armed threats while protecting innocent civilians and gathering evidence that could dismantle entire criminal organizations. The engagement lasted less than 3 minutes and ended with 4 traffickers unconscious and secured, while Elena maintained communication with federal tactical units who were simultaneously raiding trafficking facilities throughout the region. "Federal units, this is Agent Martinez. Primary targets at my location are secured. Request immediate evidence collection and coordination with victim recovery operations." "Outstanding work, Agent Martinez. All facilities secured, 23 victims recovered, trafficking network completely dismantled." As Elena secured the unconscious traffickers while federal agents processed the largest human trafficking bust in state history, she realized that 12 years of carefully maintained civilian identity had just been revealed in service of protecting people whose names she would never know, but whose lives had depended on her willingness to sacrifice the peaceful existence she'd built after leaving law enforcement. But looking at the evidence that would ensure these criminals could never hurt anyone else, and thinking about 23 human beings who would go home to their families instead of disappearing into trafficking networks, Elena understood that some sacrifices created more beauty than any flower arrangement could ever provide. 6 months after the trafficking bust that had transformed her from anonymous florist to recognized community protection specialist, Elena had developed a dual identity that balanced her love of creating floral beauty with her expanded role as a consultant for operations targeting criminal organizations that exploited legitimate businesses. Sunshine Flowers looked exactly the same. Same welcoming atmosphere, same artistic arrangements, same dedication to helping customers express emotions through flowers. But the shop had also become a model for how small businesses could enhance community security while maintaining their primary mission of serving customers with excellence and authenticity. Elena's approach to integrated business security operations was being studied by federal agencies and implemented by small business associations that wanted to protect their members from criminal exploitation. Her training programs emphasized that effective anti-trafficking efforts came from understanding that business owners were uniquely positioned to recognize unusual requests and could provide intelligence that law enforcement agencies couldn't obtain through conventional methods. Elena told a conference of small business owners, "The most important anti-trafficking tool is an entrepreneur who knows their industry well enough to recognize when someone is trying to exploit their services for criminal purposes, and who has the knowledge and communication protocols to report suspicious activities without compromising their business operations." Her work had attracted attention from international organizations that coordinated anti-trafficking efforts between countries. Elena found herself consulting with law enforcement agencies throughout North America about how criminal organizations used legitimate businesses as cover for illegal operations. But Elena's most important work remained the daily routine of Sunshine Flowers, where she continued to create arrangements that brought joy to weddings, comfort to funerals, and healing to relationships that needed the beauty of flowers to express what words couldn't capture. Her customers eventually learned about her law enforcement background, but they also understood that Elena's ability to read people and understand their needs had made her both an effective federal agent and an exceptional florist. The same intuition that had helped her survive 14 years undercover now helped her create floral arrangements that touched people's hearts during their most important moments. Elena had discovered that the most meaningful service often came from people who understood both darkness and light, who could recognize evil but chose to create beauty, and who used their capabilities to protect others while building something positive that would outlast any criminal organization. Sunshine Flowers had become more than a business. It was a symbol of how ordinary people could fight extraordinary evil through dedication to community service, artistic expression, and the understanding that beauty was worth defending against those who would exploit or destroy it. Some people opened flower shops because they loved working with beautiful things and making people happy. Others opened them because they understood that communities needed both beauty and protection, and that sometimes the most effective guardians were the ones who created gardens where good things could grow safely. Elena Reyes had chosen her mission, and she was succeeding one arrangement at a time, one protected community at a time, one rescued victim at a time, in a world where flowers still bloomed, because someone who understood the value of both beauty and courage was tending the garden. Sometimes protection comes not from those who wear badges or carry weapons, but from those who create beauty and nurture life in our communities. Elena Reyes proved that heroes arrange flowers, serve customers with love, and fight the darkness not because they seek recognition, but because they understand that some things, like beauty, innocence, and community, are worth defending with everything you have. Have you met someone like Elena? Someone whose ordinary work concealed extraordinary dedication to others' safety? Share their story in the comments. And if this story reminded you that heroes bloom in flower shops, serve in small businesses, and protect us while creating beauty, hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes the most powerful weapon against evil is someone who chooses to make the world more beautiful while making sure it stays safe for beauty to exist.